if we keep pushing our comfort zone, if we keep stepping outside our comfort zone and we keep challenging ourselves, we're going to learn new things, whether that's in dressage, whether it's in show jumping, whether it's in cross country, not just about heights.
Happy Monday. Super happy to be here. As always, how are you doing this morning, Lorna?
I am great, thank you. It's a lovely sunny morning in Scotland, so a great start to the week.
So British talking about the weather, aren't you?
The weather, there we go again. Actually, if you listened to Mary's podcast last week, that's exactly what she said. Well, we love to talk about the weather.
No,
But
I realise
it does actually make a difference to your mood. A good old bit of vitamin D actually makes a huge difference.
It does. Yeah, but apart from the weather, what are we going to talk about today is something that every single rider goes through at some part in their journey. It's not the most fun part to go through in your riding, but it's something we eventually run into, all of us, probably several times, to be fair. Not only probably, definitely several times throughout our riding journey. And it's something that I've been through very recently. As I spoke about, I've had a bit of a challenging time with my show jumping mare Queenie. And yeah, what I'm talking about is slump. And we're going to start with defining what a slump is. But before we do, if you're experiencing any of the things that we talk about inside of this podcast, what we're going to talk about today or what we've talked about in other podcasts, and you feel like, the podcast is great, but I could really do with a bit of extra support, some accountability, someone really talking me through this, someone doing it specifically for me, then what I advise you to do is to go to mindig.eu/coaching, check out the options that we have to support you on a more personal basis or in a group. And by filling in the form on mindig.eu/coaching, me and Lorna can help you figure out what would be the best option for you to make sure that you get that a little bit more extended support. And as always, you'll find the link to that in the show notes of this episode. Right, diving in. What is a slump? I'm going to start with a definition that I got from, I guess, AI when I asked it. And I asked this just before we started recording. So basically what it says, that it's a sustained, often unexplained, decline in an individual's or team's performance, falling below their established standards for a prolonged period. It is characterized by reduced efficiency, low confidence, and mental, physical, or technical difficulties. What do you think about that definition, Lorna?
I think that's a great dictionary definition. I'm sure we can make it a little bit. You and I both like simple, and I'm sure a lot of other people like simple. So yeah, great work in finding your definition, but let's try and make it a bit simpler for everybody else. Actually,
we'll obviously talk through this, but I gotta say, when I read this, I was like, yeah, that is exactly what I have been going through the last couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
So to make it then maybe a little bit more relatable or a little bit more specific to riding, obviously we're talking about an individual or actually a team, to be fair. It's a partnership, right? A team with your 100%. Horse. And so what I experienced was I had been going through a long period of really great performance throughout the whole winter. Everything felt easy. I was stepping up to the 135. I was jumping 130s as if, it was just our comfort zone. It wasn't like we were placed every time, but we were often placed and we often had clear rounds, and it just felt easy, easy. Okay, in the context of the word. I mean, we're still jumping over big show jumping fences, but it just flowed. It worked out, And then I started jumping outdoors 3 weeks ago, and everything fell apart. I went into this run, I'm being completely honest here. I rode to the first fence, had a bit of a, just not quite enough momentum. I ride towards fence number 2, and the horse stopped. The horse hasn't stopped in months, maybe a year. The horse stops. And I'm like, what? Taking a complete surprise. I'm riding towards the fence again, a very, stable canter, let's say, maybe a little bit extra push, as you do after your horse has stopped, jumps. And that was fine. And then a couple more fences and the horse is taking off. And I didn't have any brakes, nothing. I couldn't turn, I couldn't brake, nothing worked anymore. I go out. And I'm like, I'm going to need help with this. But then, someone was like, why don't you just ride another round? And I was like, okay, yeah, maybe it's just a one-off. Now she's not going to stop. She's seen the fences. I go in to ride the second round. She stops on fence number 1. I was like, okay, I need to get her over this fence, just canter out it again, jump the first fence. And then it, again, a couple of fences were right, but then she completely took off with me. I had to make a circle, upon which I was eliminated because she had to stop at the first fence. And I just walked out and I thought to myself, what the hell is going on, And then, I was like, okay, I'm just going to fix this in training. So I went to a training, the horse stops again. And, okay, she's jumped a couple of fences, but then she stopped. And more than anything, not only the fact that the horse stopped, I felt myself so like doubting myself. Like I feel like I couldn't see any strides, I couldn't ride any distances, and nothing came up. I was cantering, but then it was almost as if the horse switched off before the fence, and then I panicked and I didn't do anything. Like I stopped riding altogether, upon which the horse stopped, or we got like an awkward distance. She kind of jumped, but then, or she took off completely. Like it was just like all those things that had just felt so easy and it just flowed, and I hadn't been overthinking anything for months. All of a sudden, I couldn't do anything. So it's really that thing of like the things that are used to be easy all of a sudden feels so difficult, and that like low confidence. I felt like, okay, I can't ride my horse, and she's starting to stop. I'm ruining her. So yeah, all those things of like mental, physical, technical difficulties. So I hope that that makes it a little bit more clear. Maybe Lorna, you have another example as to like how you've been
Yeah.
through these periods in your riding.
I think, first of all, well done for being so open and honest and sharing that with everyone, because this happens to everyone. Like, it happens in my own riding, it happens to you, it happens to our clients. Like, it is going to continue to happen throughout your whole riding career. So, super well done for sharing it. I love what you say. My definition would be, based on, again, my own riding, all the other riders we work with, is you've lost your flow a bit. So, for me, it's that feeling of not knowing how you, not riding to your ability that you're capable of, essentially. And things that, like you talk about, things that used to feel automatic, like you didn't really have to think about them. They just, they flowed easily. They seem to happen automatically. That appears to be gone. A drop in our confidence. It's an accumulation of all these little things happening, and suddenly we feel like we've lost our confidence. And also just feeling a bit disconnected, I think, or just feeling a bit disconnected and stuck at the same time. I think the important thing is feel like you've gone backwards. Every single person sits there. How come I could do this a month ago? How come I could do it 2 months ago? How come I could do it in the indoor season and I can't? But that is not necessarily what's happening. And I think that's a long way around, but yes, did I have any examples of this? I absolutely do. And, the end of last season, when similar challenges, actually, big, strong horses running, you're trying to get more power in your canter, you're trying to get them to wait, not be so strong, all that kind of stuff. So you start doing different exercises, or you start doing a bit different training. Then you get a little bit stuck in your head because it feels difficult, or you feel like you can't do it. But for me, and obviously I came through the other side of it like you have also, it probably took me longer to come through the other side of it, actually, than it's taken you. But for me, it's an unfamiliar feeling. Like, I didn't like it. It was easy to say, I've lost my confidence. It's easy to say he's lost his confidence. There was a bit of mismatch in trust here because we weren't riding the way that we've always ridden. So for me, it's an unfamiliar feeling. That unfamiliar feeling comes from stepping outside your comfort zone. It's not always about going and jumping the bigger fences. That can be not a smaller canter, but a more powerful canter, a less runny canter. So actually, for me, if I was to frame it, I would say it's an unfamiliar feeling that I get from stepping outside my comfort zone. Therefore, that is going to appear throughout my whole riding career.
So it feels so it feels permanent, or what do you mean with that? It's going to apply for the rest of your riding career?
Because if we keep pushing our comfort zone, if we keep stepping outside our comfort zone and we keep challenging ourselves, we're going to learn new things, whether that's in dressage, whether it's in show jumping, whether it's in cross country, not just about heights. So something is always going to feel familiar, because if you're always pushing yourself, you're never going to have felt that before. And if, I would almost strive for that. It's a horrible place to be. It's a really uncomfortable place to be. But if we are in that place, and I think once you've got through it once, you can start to trust yourself that you're going to be able to do it again. If you've never experienced this and it's the first time, and I'm not saying I'd never experienced it before, but like at the end of last year, we'd had a really good season, and you jump in a familiar way, or you have a familiar canter, whatever that looks like, and all of a sudden it starts to unravel a little bit. It's a place of panic, actually, I think, because exactly what you're saying, we start to question ourselves. We start to judge ourselves. I'm not good enough. I'm ruining my horse. Like, how come I could do it? And now, I've used up all my tokens, or I've used up all my lives. And, you talk about Queenie. Queenie has such a big heart. My God, like I've used up everything I've got. But actually, it's so not true. It's just that something feels unfamiliar in what you're actually doing.
Yeah. Okay. So what you mean is actually just that it's the fact that unfamiliar feeling, the fact that you're going through a slump, we'll get into this, but like you're going through a period like this where you experience those feelings and those thoughts, in a way, it's a good thing, because it means that you have pushed yourself. It means that you have made yourself uncomfortable. It means that you have made things more challenging. Like you say,
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily have to be that you're jumping a bigger course, right? For me, it was
Yeah.
just probably the fact that I started jumping outdoors. It's been windy or whatever, it's just, like you say, an unfamiliar, uncomfortable situation. And what you're also saying is like, first of all, if you want to grow and you want to get better, this is unavoidable.
Yeah.
Stop trying to avoid this. Actually, we should welcome it, and we should, be grateful that it happens, because it means that we are progressing. We are daring to push our comfort zone. We are courageous enough to test out things that we don't know for sure is going to work.
And I think that's it's a huge trust thing, isn't it, as well? Like you trust your trainer, first of all, that, you're changing something for the better. And I always
Mhm.
remember when I started changing it last year, and it was in the middle of the season. And I always remember the guy I was training with, he's like, this is the worst time we could possibly do this. I think it was before we went 2-star long at Schoon, and the whole thing went to shit, for want of a better word. And it did. And, you said that in your post as well. And he's like, this is probably the worst possible time we could be doing it. And it's true, because then you add in the pressure of, and we've talked about this before, the next competition and the next competition and the next competition. So in hindsight, this should have been a pressure word. But ideally, it would have been my winter homework. You would have unraveled it all through the winter so that you could just keep training and improving and growing. But sometimes you don't have a choice in that. Things happen. So if I look back to, and funnily enough, it was that video that I sent you when Alfie jumped off that step and he literally bolted down the hill.
I still remember
Remember that, to the bottom of the hill. Didn't have the choice to wait to do something about that. It felt unsafe. I was not confident in that situation whatsoever. Every part of me wanted to pull up. Obviously, I rode through it and I got around the track. But in that moment, I had no choice. Like, I had to do something different in that moment. So, yeah, I could have waited. I could have quit eventing for the rest of the year. I could have done a million things. But because we have growth mindsets, and a lot of people have growth mindsets, sometimes you just have to put yourself in that situation, in that moment, and just find a way through it to the best of your ability.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Testing something new. But I think
Yeah.
what's interesting here often, like, in your case, I don't know if you knew it at the moment, that it was because you went through this challenging period because you started changing things. I don't know if you were aware of it at the time, or if it was something that you figured out afterwards or throughout this period, maybe. Because I feel like, and that is, I guess, the part of why this is challenging, because it feels, at least it felt like to me, that it was, and this also belongs in this definition that I found. It's like it's unexplained. Like, all
Yeah.
of a sudden, something that was easy is hard. And I think that is part of them. And I guess that's me all over. Like, I love to understand things. I love you. I know that you also love to understand things. And I guess that is part of the challenge, that it's like you don't quite understand why that has happened. Like, at first sight, it's like, I could ride the horse last week and everything is fine and I could brake, and then all of a sudden the horse is stopping. I can't brake.
Yeah.
It's that, and I guess that's, for me, is like, it's the part that is unexplained, the part that I don't quite understand. Why is this happening, right? And I think that is a super important point to start with, to figure out why it has happened. Like, you sound like, at least now, you have a very good idea of why this happened, because you went to another trainer, you started riding in a different manner. And if I look back at now, okay, I started riding outdoors, but then I guess in my head I'm thinking, well, I've been riding outdoors before. It shouldn't make a difference. But I think, now I can understand. Now I can see it was a buildup of different things. It was the fact that I had been riding jump offs for extended periods of time. I had, I started riding outdoors. There's a lot of wind at this point in time. Now I can kind of understand it. Now I can put the pieces together. But I think that is part of the process of getting yourself out of this, is understanding that it's not that you're shit all of a sudden, or that your luck has run out. There is an explanation to why this happened. Because if there's an explanation and you understand the cause, then you can also do something about it. Then, like, the way out of it also becomes clearer.
I think just be aware that your brain, I talk about that red-blue brain framework, your brain has gone into threat mode, like, it's gone into protection mode. It's essentially, I always say, the one question the brain has is, am I safe? And that's not physically safe, it is in your being, but mentally safe, that comes down to other people's opinions. I'm a shitty rider, I'm never going to progress. Like, all those kind of things, you have literally gone into protection mode. And as soon as we hit that place, we've lost blue brain. We've lost what's the plan. And I think the more we do of this, and the more we realize that slumps are part of this process, they are part of this journey, you can reflect better on what has actually happened and find the facts and take the emotion out of it, as I always say. And then what's the plan? Like, what do I have to figure out? What do I have to get better at? Like, all those kind of things. But in any one of those moments, our brain goes into protection mode. It wants to protect us. Like, it wants to protect our ego. It wants to, make sure that we're safe. But generally, it's full of emotion, and we really struggle to progress from that place. And I have been there. I've talked about this. There was a day, and it was just before I was about to go eventing, and I was riding in the arena. Not one distance was there. Like, I'd gone into complete overthinking. And every single time my trainer said, you're fine, it's there, it's there. I couldn't see it. Like, and I'm all about creating canter like you are. We know all this stuff. But for some reason, in that protection mode, all I could focus on was seeing. And I actually got off the horse in the middle of the arena, and I was crying, like, hand on heart. I was like, I can't do it. I just can't do it. And actually, in that moment, I couldn't do it because I'd overthought everything so much and my body had become so tense. I actually couldn't do it. And she got on, and she's like, yeah, it's not easy. But, like, obviously she has more experience than I do, and I managed to get around and stuff. But that day I didn't get back on because I was like, I just got so in my own head that there was no plan to access. I'd gone so much into threat mode, red mode, that I just physically, I always say you can't think yourself out of a nervous system reaction. That's what was happening. So there's no way I could have access to that blue part in the moment.
Yeah, I was, to be fair, I was doing exactly the same thing. I got to the point with my trainer where, the worst stop, like, it wasn't like she was stop all the time, but like she stopped 2 times, and I could see that it was because that I stopped riding, and I was like, okay, this is not, I exactly the same thing. I felt like I just can't do this today for some reason, and I did exactly the same thing. I got off, I asked my trainer Peter to get on, and then at least, you can kind of, I suppose, the horse, he can fix the horse part. And then, you still have to fix your own part, but then
100%.
at least, and I guess that's the challenge when we are dealing with horses. There's 2 parts of the partnership. So we always have to be mindful of that. We have to be mindful of that there's 2 parts to it. So when you go down, and I think that is very helpful then in those situations, if you can have someone else get on the horse, because then at least it will be easier. That part will be easier. Like, so if you can figure out yourself, at least the horse part will be easier for you, if that makes sense. So no, I did exactly the same thing. But to just like, I think make really clear. So I think the first step when you're going through this is, first of all, get factual, take a step back, reflect, figure out what is happening. Like, go away from that judgmental of like, I'm just shit, my luck has run out, blah, 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 all that kind of bullshit, and find out like, okay, what are the factual reasons? What actually happened here? Like, what actually happened? And the reasons will be there. Like, things doesn't happen, without a reason. There will be a reason for that. And if you can't see it yourself, ask for help, because here's the thing. Oftentimes we can't see it ourselves. Like, I also needed help for someone else to watch my videos and say like, yeah, this is what's happening. And like, because you get, like you say, emotional, you step into that red brain, and then you get blinded. Like, you can't see the logical reasoning. So to ask someone else to explain to you, like, why do you believe this is happening? And then you can kind of figure that out together. And then I think the second thing is also, this very easily becomes a vicious circle. Like, when you're in a slump and you're starting to overthink, and it doesn't quite work, and then you start thinking, oh, I can't do it, and you get very emotional, and then indeed with a horse, because then you stop riding, then the horse starts stopping or whatever, or then I think indeed find a way to break that cycle. Like we already spoke about, like find someone else to get on the horse and fix that part. That at least shifts the direction a little bit. And another thing I think is also is about how you think about this slump. Like, do you think about it as something that's being fatal, something that is, is going to keep on going on forever? Or do you see it as being a growth opportunity? Like, even the way you speak about this, like the words that we often say, like you can say, I am in a slump. That feels really like it's so hard and tough, and it's going to take me months. Or you can say, I'm finding, like, I'm working my way through this. Like, I'm working my way through this challenge. I'm growing. I'm growing as a rider. I'm finding new opportunities. I'm getting forced to think in a new direction, to test new things, which is helping me grow as a rider. Like, it's all depending on how you choose to look at the situation.
Yeah. I always say you're either depositing confidence or you're withdrawn. And obviously when we're in those slump moments, we're withdrawn all the single time by judgment, overthinking, belief, all that kind of stuff. But if you want to actually put some deposits back in the bank, go back to, and we've obviously talked about this, things that feel achievable. So even, if you go back to jumping smaller fences in the moment, that's going to help your confidence. Actually noticing what's going well. You jump a few smaller fences, because those small repeatable wins are essentially going to build up. You need those every single day to keep, I always say confidence is not something you have or you haven't. We have to work on it every single day. Otherwise you lose it. You use it or you lose it. You have to keep topping it up. And people will be like, oh, so that means dropping down, stepping back, doing whatever. No, it's it's lowering the bar slightly. So that doesn't mean lowering your standard. But for me, if we drop back a bit, then that helps in rebuilding that stability of our confidence again.
Yeah, like create experiences
Yeah.
that feels easy for yourself.
Yeah,
Because that is, like you
100%.
say, those are making transactions into your bank account, like
Yeah,
into your confidence bank
100%.
account. Every time you
Yeah.
have an experience and you feel like, I got it, this feels easy, like that's where your
Yeah.
confidence grows, right? Your bank
Yeah.
account. And every time you're having those more challenging rounds, let's say, we also need
Yeah.
those because that's where we grow from, but you're actually making deposits from your bank account when you do that, right? I love that. So I actually still remember, Lorna, that you told me that in a voice note. You were like, why don't you just go out and jump a 115 and 120? Just do that and make it feel easy. And that's exactly what I did. And I 100% believe that that was the reason why I was able to get through this so quickly. And also what you said in the beginning, trust that you are working through this. Trust that it's not fatal. Trust that it's not final. Trust that this is not going to take. And the quicker that you can trust that you're going to get through this and start working on those smaller wins, the quicker that you're going to get through it. But just that knowledge of like, this is temporary. This is something that everyone goes through and I am going to work through it. And I think, like you said before as well, the more times that you go through this and you realize that actually it is temporary and actually I did come out on the other side, and actually I didn't only come out on the other side, but I actually came out a better rider. Like every time that you can have an experience like that, like I did now as well. I really had an aha moment in all of this and I figured something else. And now I feel more confident than ever. Like 2 weeks later, I can't believe I'm sitting here and saying it, but I feel more confident in my show jumping now than I did before those 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Before the slump happened. So I can now very confidently sit here and say like, look, actually, I love, like, okay, I'm not going to say I love going through those things, but I know that I'm going to become better from it. I know that it's temporary and I know I'm going to become a better rider from it. So that, in that experience helps it not be such a big, scary, bad thing, if that makes sense. But that also takes going through it a couple of times to understand that that's the way it's working.
Yeah. And I think that is the key, huh? You have to understand what is happening in the first place. Understand what is actually going on. Stop fighting with yourself and start to understand and work with your brain in a helpful way, because that is what will allow your confidence to come back again. It's not gone anywhere, but you've just taken too much money out the bank and put none back in. So therefore, you can't fill from an empty tank. There's nothing left to take from, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, like, choose the way you look at it. Like, it's not like that saying is like, I lost my confidence. I also felt like I wanted to speak out, like I lost my confidence. But then, like you said, you never really, like, your confidence bank account is there all the time. It's not because it's very low that it's not there. Like, it's there all the time. You've just made, like you said, a couple of too many. Is deposits where you put money in, or do you put them in? Or
Deposit you put in, withdrawal you take out.
Oh, okay. Then I said wrong before. You've just made too many withdrawals and too little deposits. But that means it's not there, and you build it up before, so you can build it up again. And I think that knowledge.
But I think knowing that you have to work on it every day, like, I speak to so many riders, you're not just going to wake up one day and you're going to feel confident. That's bullshit. Like, all of it, you're confident or you're not confident. That's rubbish. Like, the people that are confident or appear to be confident, they're working on that every single day, even if they're not, because they have such a self-belief. They have such a trust in themselves. They're reflecting based on facts and not emotion. Like, there's so many things go into it. And even though you just look, at all these pros and you're like, oh yeah, they're so confident, they're so good, they're so this, they're so that, they are working on their bank account every single day, like, for sure. And yes, they're taking money out. There's things that happen. They judge themselves. You see it all the time in their posts on social media, but they're always putting it back in at the same time. So they never get to that point. They're at zero. So there's nothing wrong with a slump. There's nothing wrong with, judging yourself and taking it out your bank and doing whatever. That's human nature, but you have to make sure you're doing something to keep putting it back in all the time as well. Otherwise, we're left what feels like zero.
Yeah. 100%. And if jumping on that train, and if you feel like you need some support with making those deposits, then that's obviously what we can support you with, because we're very good in making those withdrawals. We're very good in taking confidence out of our bank account, but we tend to not be as great with putting it back in. And that's obviously what me and Lorna specialize in. So if you do want to gain some support in making deposits into your confidence account or working through a slump, then do get in touch on myndig.eu/coaching. You can fill out a form, tell us what's going on in your life, and we will get in touch, back you in. And we will
Try again. Try again. Deep breath.
And we will get in touch with you as quickly as possible, book in a call and see how we can support you. Right, Lorna, anything I missed in there?
No, I think that's all good. But please do reach out. Never be afraid to reach out, even if you're just looking for a wee bit of advice or a point in the right direction. We have lots of options.
100%. And as always, we're going to finish this episode with challenging you to make strides in your mindset so you can truly make strides in your writing. And we will see you on the next Magical Monday.